Hi everyone, it's Henry here, and this is the first video in a small series I wanted to make about painting different types of corrosion for our gaming miniatures. And we're going to start out with verdigris. This is that classic sort of turquoise blue-green colour that we see on copper or copper alloys like bronze and brass. A common challenge that we might come up against when we're painting our miniatures, particularly when they're for gaming, so good-looking armies looking good on the shelf and on the table, is this battle between realism and looking cool. And it's often small effects such as this verdigris that can prove quite challenging. So we're going to take a look at that in this video and figure out how to make it look awesome but also not take forever. Like I imagine many of you, are pretty excited about the new Undead release coming from Games Workshop, the Soulblight Gravelords. So I wanted to test out some corrosion techniques and some schemes that I thought I might use on this army when it's released. So we're going to do it all on this skeleton dude, covering things like verdigris, rust, the old bone. We might even touch on how to make sort of the old decayed wood as well. So by the end of this series we'll have him fully painted. First things first, I'm going to make up a wash, and for this I'm using Agrax Earthshade and Games Workshop Terradon Turquoise contrast paint, and this mix is 2:1 Agrax to Turquoise. I might then thin it down a tiny bit with some water on my brush, but it's not hugely important. We're just looking for this dark, dirty turquoise colour that you can see here. When we're looking at the corroded brass or bronze in this case, you notice that it's not just this bright turquoise colour that you see. The whole thing will have different layers of the verdigris on it. So the first one we're going to use is this wash. So I've slapped it all over, but rather than leave it there, I go back in with a clean brush and I just remove it from some of the higher areas. So this is our first layer of corrosion, and it's building up these layers that's going to give us a fantastic effect and not look like we've just slapped the turquoise wash all over it. So I've left it in the recesses, but I've also let it discolour some of the surface, and this is why a contrast paint works really well for this technique rather than just say using a green wash paint, because it does cling to the surface a little bit more. It also helps to really dull the metal down. So I take my time, I work around the model, working sort of armour panel by armour panel. And you've noticed I've airbrushed the colour on here. That's just because I wanted to get it done quickly. If I was painting the miniature from scratch, I'd just be brush painting this in, because obviously there's fairly small areas of armour on this skeleton, albeit quite a significant portion of him. They're not that big. Next up, I'm taking some GW Sotek Green, so a turquoise paint. I'm going to thin this down just with water until it's roughly a wash consistency like you'd find out of a wash pot. It's a little bit thick there. I want it to be fairly translucent. That's more like it, so it's easy to see through. I'm going to apply this mix into all those areas where we've got the previous wash coat on, but slightly smaller. So surrounding that lighter turquoise is going to be that much more muted, darker turquoise that we created. You'll notice when you use a very dilute paint, if you have very much of it on your brush at all, when you touch that to the miniature, it tends to wick off onto the model and you end up with these little puddles or pools of paint on the model. And then as that dries, the pigment will move to the outside edges of those little pools and you'll get that horrible tide mark that 99% of the time we don't want, we hate, we get really frustrated with. This is one of the few times where actually those little pools don't matter, and if you were to look at reference photos of verdigris, you can actually see quite a lot of them. I would suggest with this that it's very much personal taste, and perhaps if I was painting a scenery piece, so a much larger surface with this verdigris effect, I wouldn't mind it at all. But on this model, yeah, it's very much up to you. If I was painting something like the Minotaurs Space Marine that we saw at the start, this is probably where I'd stop. It's not completely realistic, absolutely not, but it's quite subtle but it's still giving us that idea of the verdigris or the corrosion of the armour. I wanted to go quite a lot further, so I simply kept applying, waiting for the Sotek Green to dry, and then applying some more. And you can see as we go over and add layer upon layer upon layer, we get different opacities of the turquoise. So it's a lot stronger and lighter in some areas, it's a lot more muted in others. This is one of those benefits of layering up those effects, so it becomes a lot more interesting than just slapping that wash all over. To go a step further, we can take an even lighter turquoise, in this case the aptly named Verdigris by Vallejo Game Colour. I'm going to thin this down to a very similar consistency that we did the Sotek Green. And just like with the Sotek, where we applied it in smaller amounts within the area of the darker turquoise, we'll do exactly the same here. I'm going to focus on areas such as around rivets and sort of deep within any indentations or creases, areas where I think the armour's unlikely to have been buffed essentially, so cleaned off and the bronze underneath revealed. Verdigris is, I think, quite interesting, and whenever I'm doing different sorts of corrosion and weathering, I'll often go and read up about what it is in real life. I'll look at reference pictures and I'll try to understand how it behaves and how it occurs, that type of thing. And we know with verdigris that it just sort of sits on the surface, doesn't really do any particular damage. So I think it's nice to have some areas where it's buffed off on this model. Also, if you're a bit of a colour nerd, there's some nice sort of, I don't know what you call it, etymology of the name, sort of where it comes from. Verdigris is kind of like proto-turquoise, basically. So I'm just taking my time, just like I did with the Sotek Green, and building it up. You can already see on the shoulder pad where we did it to begin with, it dries sort of a bit more mellow than how it goes on. I wanted to show you how I would approach doing verdigris with just acrylic paints. I know a lot of you only have access to certain acrylic paints, and often sometimes you don't have access to certain brands. So I hope here you can see effectively what we've done is used a muddy dark turquoise, quite a nice bright mid turquoise, and then a very, very pale turquoise at the very end. The other way that we can approach it, and this is how I will approach it most of the time, is to use oils. I start off exactly the same way, that nice heavy wash of our dirty Agrax and Terradon mix. Then I'm going to grab a turquoise oil paint, in this case Turquoise Lights by Abteilung 502. I thin this down into a wash using an odourless mineral spirits. This one's by Winsor Newton and it's called Sansador. Once I've got my wash consistency, just slop it all over. You don't need to treat the paint with any varnishes or anything like that. As long as your acrylic paint is dry, you're not going to have any problems, you're not going to have any reactions. It's a really great colour, this. Next up, I'm going to take a lighter turquoise colour, in this case again the rather aptly named Copper Oxide Blue, again by Abteilung 502. But you see again it's a normal sort of mid-value turquoise, and then a very, very light one. And this, I'm just using it neat, so I'm not diluting it at all, I'm just going to dot it in a few spots over the shield. You can see that previous turquoise colour has dried really nicely, very, very matte finish. Oh, that little puppy hair's in the background. I tried to get rid of it on the last picture. It's not conducive to keeping a clean painting area. We grab another brush now, it's just sort of a soft flat brush. And I've got a little bit of thinner on this, not a lot, it's just sort of damp. I'm just going to move that lighter turquoise colour around on the model now. So just removing a little bit of it, trying to stay in the one direction so you almost create like some streaks going down there. And although our previous layer was dry, if we use a lot of thinner and we push hard on the surface, we are going to reactivate the first turquoise we put on, so bear that in mind. And then what we can do is take a Q-tip, dip it into the thinner, touch off all the excess, and then very, very lightly just move it over some of the most raised areas on the shield. That's going to remove the oil paint that's above it, and it's going to reveal that nice bronze acrylic colour we had underneath. But do be very gentle with this sage in case you rub off any of the paint underneath. We can combine the effects as well. So here I've taken the lighter turquoise colour, and now I'm really going to heavily oxidise this bronze. So I'm going to start pulling a ton of these streaks down from all the cracks, just using the neat oil paint. And if we get a streak that we don't like, clean our brush, then we can just go in and effectively erase it. You notice all the time I'm trying to work top to bottom, trying to work vertically. Your streaks are always going to look the best if they're real nice and vertical. So I wanted these skeletons to be very, very heavily corroded. I've tried to present the video in such a way that you can stop at multiple different points depending on the level of corrosion and the effect that you want with the paint job. We'll leave it here for this video. I've blacked out the rest of the model and you can see that the impact's pretty full on once we've done that. It's a wonderful colour, this turquoise, this verdigris, and I think it's going to look fantastic against the other things that we're going to put on this model. Corrosion, weathering, battle damage, all that sort of stuff is an area I'm really passionate and I really enjoy when it comes to miniatures painting. So I hope you're going to enjoy this short series where I touch on the sort of most common types. I'm also really excited about if I can get this skeleton looking how I want, because then I'm quite tempted to see if I can speed paint an undead army. So thank you very much for watching. If you've enjoyed the video, hit the like button. If you want to ask me any questions about what I've done, pop them in the comments. I'll do my best to get back to you. And I'll see you next time.